Ma'am, this is a five-star hotel, not a shelter. People like you don't stay here. Those were the exact words that cut through the rain, cruel and cold. From the mouth of head receptionist Karen Ellis, her voice carried a smug kind of certainty, the kind that assumes she'd never be corrected. Beside her, Michael Hayes folded his arms, looking down on the woman who stood outside the glass doors, soaked from head to toe. Security. Keep her outside until she leaves. We don't check in strangers who lie about their identity. His voice was sharp, echoing through the marble lobby. And in that single moment, everyone nearby froze, pretending not to hear. Before I take you into this story, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe, and leave a like if you believe that dignity should never depend on appearance. Now, let's begin. Sophia Grant had returned to New York that afternoon on a private flight from London, exhausted but fulfilled. She'd just closed a $3 billion deal that secured her hotel chain's expansion into Europe. Her driver had dropped her directly at the front of the Grant Lux Hotel, the crown jewel of her empire, worth $5 billion. But she wasn't arriving as a CEO today. She came quietly. No entourage, no press, just herself in a long black coat, hood up against the heavy rain. The bellhop reached for her bag, but before he could act, Karen stopped him. "Leave it," she said sharply. "We don't handle unverified luggage." The young man hesitated, glancing at Sophia, whose calm eyes met his for only a second. She said nothing. Instead, she pulled her suitcase closer, her fingers steady despite the chill. Inside the lobby, the world gleamed with crystal chandeliers and white marble floors, reflecting the lives of people who believed themselves superior. Sophia had built this world. Every corner of this place existed because of her vision and resilience. Yet now, she stood outside her own creation, treated as if she didn't belong. "I have a reservation," Sophia said softly. "Under Grant." Karen tilted her head. "Of course you do." The words dripped with sarcasm. "And I suppose next, you'll say you own the place too?" She turned to Michael, smirking. "Maybe she found that name online." Michael chuckled, a deep, disdainful sound. "Look, we've had people try this before. Let's not waste time. Just tell her the system's down." Karen nodded, picking up the phone. "Unfortunately, ma'am, our booking system seems to be temporarily offline. You'll have to wait outside until we confirm your identity." "In the rain?" Sophia asked quietly. "It's policy," Karen replied. Without meeting her eyes, Michael leaned closer, lowering his voice but ensuring others could still hear. "You could try a different hotel, ma'am. There's a Comfort Inn about 5 blocks east, probably more your kind of place." A murmur passed among the staff nearby, some shocked, others pretending to be busy. One of them was Emily Chen, a young junior receptionist from China. She froze in disbelief. Her eyes darted to Sophia, then back to Karen, unsure whether to speak. Another, James Lee, a bellhop in his 20s, gripped his phone tightly in his pocket. His conscience told him to record, though his job whispered silence for 45 long minutes. Sophia stood outside, drenched by the storm. Her black umbrella, snapped by the wind, lay broken beside her. She could see them through the glass. Karen sipping coffee, Michael scrolling his phone, and Victor Lang, the deputy manager, whispering something that made Michael nod. "You're right," Victor said softly to him. "She doesn't look like she belongs here. Keep her out." Victor was a man who had built his career on loyalty, not truth. He had once been grateful to Michael for hiring him after his son's suspension from college, a memory that bound him to blind allegiance. But behind that loyalty lay bitterness toward a world that, in his mind, gave people like Sophia too much power. Sophia could feel the weight of humiliation pressing against her chest. Yet she stood still, not because she was powerless, but because she was watching, observing, measuring every face that turned away, in her mind. She wasn't merely a victim of prejudice, she was documenting it in real time, like an investigator of her own empire. Rainwater ran down her cheeks, but her eyes never wavered. Inside, Michael grew restless. "Victor, go check the ID she gave them," he ordered. "She probably faked it." Victor took the ID from the counter, scanning it with irritation. His tone dripped with suspicion. "This looks printed. We can't just let anyone claim they're someone important." He looked up at Sophia through the glass. "You hear me? Ma'am, we'll call the police if this turns out to be false." At that, Sophia's calm expression didn't change. Instead, she glanced to the side where James Lee stood, hesitant, conflicted. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something passed between them. Courage. That was when James quietly turned on his phone's camera. Karen rolled her eyes and laughed. "Unbelievable. Standing there like she's somebody. Some people really don't know their place." Her words cut through the tension like glass. Behind her, Emily flinched. "Karen," she whispered, "maybe we should." "Stay out of this," Karen snapped. "You're still on probation." Sophia took a slow breath. The air around her smelled of rain and injustice. She remembered being a little girl in Brooklyn, sitting on the curb outside a grocery store, her mother's hand gripping hers tightly as a white store owner accused them of trying to steal bread. That same tone, that same look of suspicion. It had followed her all her life, but she had promised herself long ago that she would never bow to it again. Marcus had once told her, "Don't raise your voice to prove your worth, just let your results speak." So she did, without a word. Sophia reached into her soaked coat, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. "Marcus," she said softly when her brother answered, "I need you at the hotel." Marcus's voice came through, calm but edged with concern. "Which one?" "Ours." Inside the lobby, Michael was still smirking when Victor whispered, "You think she'll really wait there the whole time?" "Let her," Michael replied. "It'll make a great story for the staff meeting." Karen laughed again, unaware that James's phone was capturing every frame, every word, every sneer. The rain poured harder, but Sophia stood taller. Each drop that hit her face felt less like humiliation and more like baptism, washing away the restraint that had kept her silent for years. Within those 45 minutes, she decided something profound. This wasn't going to be just another personal insult. This was going to be the moment that forced an empire to look in the mirror. And while Michael Hayes gloated inside, sipping his coffee and feeling untouchable, Sophia Grant, founder and CEO of Grant Hospitality, was quietly preparing to transform not just a company, but the entire meaning of justice in luxury. When Sophia finally stepped into the lobby, the air was thick with discomfort. Every eye that had avoided her before was now forced to face her presence. Her clothes were still damp, her hair slightly undone from the storm, but her posture remained unbroken, steady, controlled, deliberate. The marble floors reflected her quiet dignity as she crossed them, each step echoing louder than the whispers around her. Karen Ellis glanced up, startled that Sophia had dared to return inside without permission. "Excuse me, ma'am," Karen said with that same fake politeness. "I told you to wait outside until we verified your identity." Her tone carried that brittle edge of superiority that hides fear beneath arrogance. Sophia's voice, calm but precise, answered. 45 minutes have passed. I think that's long enough to confirm whether I exist." Karen blinked, unsure whether to laugh or to feel threatened. "Well, I still don't have confirmation," she replied, shuffling papers to appear busy. Michael Hayes stepped forward, straightening his tie. "Look, ma'am, you're causing a scene. This is a luxury property. We have standards to maintain. You can't just walk in here soaked and demand service." His voice was a performance, a mask of professionalism concealing resentment. Behind them, Victor Lang stood near the security desk, typing something quickly into the computer system. He turned to Michael and said under his breath, "Want me to clear the footage from the last hour? She's got no proof of anything." Michael's lips curled into a smirk. "Do it quietly." Victor nodded, unaware that James Lee, the bellhop, had already recorded most of what happened outside. James's phone was hidden inside his jacket pocket, still recording as he moved between luggage carts. He could hear every word. The air conditioning hummed faintly, yet the tension made it feel colder than the rain. Emily Chen stood near the back counter, nervously tapping her fingers. She had seen enough to know this wasn't right, but fear kept her silent. She'd come to the U.S. just 2 years ago, working double shifts to pay off her student loans. Her visa renewal depended on this job. One wrong move, and she could lose everything. Still, she couldn't stop her conscience from whispering. When she saw Victor open the security panel and plug in a flash drive, she whispered softly to David Ruiz, the ground security supervisor. "He's deleting something." David, a tall, broad-shouldered man with calm eyes, followed her gaze. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded. "He told Michael he was going to erase footage." David exhaled deeply. "Don't say anything yet. Let me handle this." He began to walk toward the security room, but before he could take 2 steps, Victor turned and glared. "Ruiz," he said sternly, "don't touch that system. You're not cleared for this level." "I'm just doing my job," David replied, steady but firm. "The CEO's name is on this building, and if something's being hidden, I'll report it." Victor's jaw tightened. "You'll report nothing. Stay out of this, or you're fired." His voice dropped low, almost a hiss. "I've seen what happens to people who get in Michael's way." David paused, weighing his options. He'd been in this position before, watching injustice unfold and wondering if silence was safer than truth. But he thought about his younger sister, a waitress who once lost her job after being accused of stealing tips she never took. He couldn't stay silent again. Meanwhile, Sophia stood near the front desk, her eyes scanning the room. She noticed everything. How Michael's tone changed when wealthy white guests passed by. How Karen's hand trembled when she typed her name again. How Victor whispered with guarded aggression. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was calculating. "I'll wait for your system to confirm," she said evenly. "Would you like me to sit down? Or do you prefer I keep standing?" The question cut through Michael's false composure. "You can wait outside again," he said sharply. "We have guests arriving who don't need this kind of disturbance." Sophia's expression didn't change. "I see," she said simply, then turned toward the lobby's seating area. A small crowd of guests had begun to notice. One older man, Edward Thompson, an investor from Connecticut, whispered to his wife, "It's shameful how they're treating her." But he didn't intervene. No one did. That was how discrimination survived. In silence, back in the security room. Victor inserted the flash drive and began erasing the footage. The monitor flickered, one by one. The clips of Sophia standing in the rain disappeared. But just before he could finish, Robert Klein, the chief of security, entered. "What are you doing, Victor?" Robert asked, his tone firm but calm. Victor jumped slightly. "Routine system maintenance," he replied quickly. "We had some corrupted files." Robert raised an eyebrow. "During an ongoing guest complaint? That's unusual timing." Victor shrugged. Michael approved it. Robert studied him for a moment, then quietly noted the timestamp before leaving the room. He'd been in law enforcement for 20 years before joining the hospitality industry. His instincts told him something was off. Back in the lobby, the atmosphere had shifted from dismissive to uneasy. Sophia took a seat near the large window overlooking the courtyard, the same place she had stood in the rain. She noticed her reflection in the glass, poised, dignified, composed, and it reminded her of her mother's words. When they see your calm, they'll see your power. Emily approached timidly, setting a cup of tea on the table beside her. I'm so sorry, ma'am, she whispered, eyes downcast. I didn't mean for you to be treated this way. Sophia looked up at her. You did nothing wrong, my dear. Her tone was gentle, reassuring. But sometimes, silence helps the wrong people win. Emily's eyes welled up. They'll fire me if I speak up. They might, Sophia replied softly. But if no one speaks, they'll never stop. Across the room, Michael noticed their exchange and barked. Emily, get back to your station. She flinched, then hurried away. Sophia didn't move. She was done playing their game. Her phone buzzed quietly on the table. Marcus's message appeared. I'm 10 minutes away, in another corner. Victor returned from the security room, wiping sweat from his forehead. All clear, he whispered to Michael. No footage left. Michael grinned. Perfect. Now, if she complains, it's her word against ours. What about the witnesses? Victor asked. No one's going to back her, Michael replied confidently. They never do. But James Lee's phone was still running. Every insult, every order, every whisper. It was all there. He slipped into the staff corridor, texting one word to himself. Saved. As the minutes passed, the tension only grew heavier. The rain outside eased, but inside, the storm was far from over. Sophia's patience had limits, and Michael was about to cross the final line. He leaned over the counter and said, with a half-smile that reeked of cruelty, You know, ma'am, you should be grateful we didn't call the police when you showed up. You looked suspicious enough. His words hung in the air like poison. Sophia rose slowly, meeting his eyes. Suspicious? She repeated, her voice steady, calm, almost kind. For walking into my own hotel? Michael blinked, caught off guard by her phrasing. You're what? He asked, scoffing, but before he could finish his smirk. The elevator doors behind her opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. Marcus Grant, sharp suit, purposeful stride, expression like thunder. The storm had found its way inside, and justice was about to follow. The entire lobby fell silent when Marcus Grant stepped out of the elevator. His presence carried the same quiet authority as his sister's, but his energy was different, more direct, more explosive. He was a man used to taking command, and every employee in that lobby felt it before he even spoke. Michael Hayes straightened his tie and tried to regain his composure. Can I help you, sir? He asked, his tone measured but uneasy. Marcus didn't answer right away. His eyes swept across the room, pausing on Sophia, still damp, still dignified, sitting calmly by the window. When their eyes met, he saw the pain she had chosen not to show anyone else. Then he turned back toward the front desk. You can start by explaining, he said slowly, why my sister, the owner of this hotel, is sitting in the lobby like a trespasser. The words hit like thunder. A gasp spread through the staff. Karen's hand trembled as she set down her coffee. Oh, owner? She stammered. Yes, Marcus replied sharply. Sophia Grant, the CEO of Grant Hospitality, the woman you just forced to wait in the rain for 45 minutes. He turned to Michael. You're the manager, correct? Michael blinked, suddenly pale. This must be some kind of misunderstanding, he said quickly. She didn't identify herself properly. Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. She didn't need to. Her name is on your paycheck. A murmur ran through the lobby as guests began whispering and pulling out their phones. Sophia stood now, finally breaking her silence. Enough. Marcus, she said softly. Her tone wasn't angry. It was steady, measured, deliberate. Let's give them a chance to speak. Her calm unsettled Michael more than Marcus's fury ever could. Karen's voice quivered as she tried to defend herself. Ma'am, I was just following procedure. We have to verify guests' identities before. Before what? Sophia interrupted. Before letting a black woman stand in her own lobby? Karen froze, unable to respond. The air felt heavy, and no one dared move. Just then, James Lee stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. Ma'am, he said to Sophia, I have something you should see. He pulled out his phone and played the video he'd secretly recorded. The insults, the laughter, the orders to erase footage. The audio was clear, undeniable. Gasps echoed through the lobby as the staff realized what was happening. Michael lunged forward, his face flushing red. You recorded us without consent? That's illegal. What's illegal? Marcus countered sharply. Is deleting company security footage and harassing the CEO. Robert Klein, the security chief, stepped out from the side hallway holding a printed report. He's right, he said calmly. I checked the logs. Someone accessed the surveillance system and deleted footage during an active guest complaint. The access ID belongs to Victor Lang. Victor froze, his fingers twitching. That's not what it looks like. He stammered. Michael told me to. Enough! Michael barked, cutting him off. But it was too late. Everyone had heard it. The chain of complicity had been exposed. Emily Chen covered her mouth in disbelief. She had suspected it, but hadn't dared to imagine how deep it went. David Ruiz stepped forward, placing a protective hand on James's shoulder. Good work, kid, he said quietly. Sophia turned to Victor. You were willing to erase evidence to protect a lie? She asked. Why? Victor's face twisted, torn between loyalty and guilt. Because I've seen how quickly accusations can destroy a man's life, he said. I was trying to protect my team. Your team? Marcus repeated. You mean the one that humiliated the person who signs your checks? Victor's voice broke slightly. You don't understand. My son was bullied at school, called names because of his skin. I thought if I kept order here, if I kept things quiet, no one would get hurt. Sophia studied him for a long moment. But silence hurts more than truth. Mr. Lang, she said softly, your son deserves a world better than this. The words hit him hard. He looked down, ashamed. Michael tried one last time to take control. Look, this is all out of proportion, he said, forcing a laugh. Nobody was trying to discriminate. Maybe she took things too personally. That sentence was the final spark. Too personally? Marcus repeated, stepping closer. You made her stand outside in the rain like a criminal. And you think this is about feelings? Sophia raised her hand gently, stopping him. Let him talk, she said, though her calm now carried a quiet power that made even Michael hesitate. I want to hear what you believe. Mr. Hayes. Michael's mask slipped for the first time. The pretense fell away, revealing years of bitterness. What I believe, he said through gritted teeth, is that people like you get everything handed to you now. You cry discrimination, and everyone bends over backwards. I've worked my whole life, and I've been passed over for promotions, twice, because the company wanted to look diverse. His words came out like venom. You don't deserve all this power. You just got lucky with timing. The room went dead silent. Sophia's expression didn't change. Luck? She asked softly. I worked 3 jobs to pay for my education. I built this company from the ground up when no bank would give me a loan because of my name. I slept in motels smaller than your office just to keep my business alive. That's not luck. That's sacrifice." She paused, her voice lowering. "But you wouldn't understand that, because privilege is invisible to those who have it." The guests watching whispered among themselves, some recording, others shaking their heads. Even Karen's eyes began to water as guilt slowly replaced arrogance. She thought of her daughter, her mixed-race child who looked more like Sophia than like her. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Michael, desperate, turned to Victor. "Say something. Tell them this was all a misunderstanding." But Victor didn't move. His loyalty had finally cracked. "I can't," he said quietly. "Not anymore." He looked at Sophia. "I'll tell the truth. I tried to delete the footage, but James saved it. Michael told me to cover it up. He said she was pretending to be someone she wasn't." Michael's face turned crimson. "You lying coward!" he shouted. "You were just as involved." "I was," Victor admitted, "and I'll take responsibility. But you led it." Robert Klein stepped forward, holding up a printed email he'd found on the internal server. "There's more," he said. "An anonymous email sent to Emily Chen last night, a threat to keep quiet if she saw anything out of line. It was traced to Victor's account." Victor's knees seemed to weaken. "I didn't mean to scare her," he whispered. "I just didn't want another incident. Michael said it would protect the staff." "No," Sophia replied firmly. "It protected your fear." She turned to Karen, who looked as if she might collapse. "And you. Why the hostility?" Karen hesitated, her voice trembling. "Because you remind me of someone I used to love," she said at last. "The father of my daughter. He was black. My family made me choose between him and them. I chose wrong. Every time I see someone like you, I see what I lost, and what I hated myself for." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Sophia's expression softened, but her resolve did not. "Pain never excuses cruelty," she said gently. "You can't heal by hurting others." Michael scoffed. "Oh, please spare me the lecture. This whole act, this perfect image, it's all just power games. You want to make me the villain? Fine, but you'll regret this." "The only thing I regret," Sophia said, turning toward Marcus, "is waiting this long to see what was happening under my own roof." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "Then it's time to act." Outside. The sound of sirens grew faintly in the distance. Not police, but the rumble of news vans pulling up. Word had spread fast. James's recording was already on its way across social media, and within minutes, the story of what happened at the Grant Lux Hotel would become a national headline. As the first reporters arrived, Sophia looked around the lobby, at the faces that had once looked through her, and said quietly, "The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs to be seen." The moment the doors swung open and the media lights spilled into the lobby, everything changed. The illusion of control Michael Hayes once held evaporated under the glare of truth. Reporters flooded the entrance with microphones raised, shouting questions about the viral video that had already begun circulating online. Is it true the CEO of Grant Hospitality was denied service at her own hotel? Who's responsible for the discrimination incident? The noise was chaotic. Yet amid the uproar, Sophia Grant stood still, composed, centered, and completely in command. Her quiet presence silenced the room more effectively than any raised voice could. Marcus moved to her side, his tone calm but authoritative as he addressed security. "Lock down internal access," he ordered. "No one leaves until we sort this out." Michael tried to interject, his face tight with panic. "This is getting out of hand. We can handle this internally." "You've handled enough," Marcus snapped, his patience gone. From this point on, you're relieved of all duties." Michael's mouth fell open. "Relieved? You can't." "He can," Sophia interrupted, her voice clear and steady. "And so can I." She took a small step forward, facing the entire staff. "Effective immediately, Michael Hayes, Karen Ellis, and Victor Lang are terminated from Grant Hospitality for misconduct, abuse of authority, and violation of company ethics." The words hung heavy in the air, final and irrefutable. Karen gasped, pressing her hand to her chest. "Ma'am, please, don't," Sophia said softly. "This isn't a punishment. It's accountability. You had a choice to show humanity. You chose humiliation." Karen's knees buckled, and she clutched the counter for support. The crowd of employees and guests stood in stunned silence. Even the reporters paused, realizing they were witnessing more than a scandal. They were witnessing a reckoning. Victor, who had been standing near the back, lowered his head. His hands trembled as he whispered, "I never wanted it to go this far." Sophia turned to him, her tone measured but firm. "Then why did you let it?" Victor's eyes were glassy with regret. "Because fear is easier than courage," he said quietly. "And I've been afraid my whole life. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of standing out. Afraid of seeing my own reflection." For a moment, Sophia said nothing. Then, with a quiet strength that drew every gaze, she replied, "You're not the only one who's been afraid, but leadership means doing the right thing even when no one's watching." Victor swallowed hard, tears threatening to fall. "My son," he began, his voice breaking. "He was bullied in school for being mixed race. He used to come home crying. I thought if I kept my head down and followed orders, I could keep him safe in a world that doesn't care. But now, I've become part of what hurt him." The room went still. Even Michael, defiant until now, looked uneasy. Sophia nodded slowly. "You can't change what you did, Victor, but you can decide what you'll do next." Victor looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "I'll help," he said quietly. "I'll testify. I'll hand over the emails, the deleted files, everything." Robert Klein stepped forward, holding a folder. "Already done," he said. "I recovered the deleted footage. IT confirmed the timestamps. The cover-up attempt is documented." Michael's face turned pale. "You can't just take my name through the mud," he shouted. "I've worked here longer than any of you. You don't understand what I've been through." "You made that clear," Sophia said, cutting him off. "You let bitterness destroy your integrity." Michael's anger boiled over. "You think you're some hero because you're calm, because you're powerful? You're just another executive who hides behind PR." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You don't scare me. Sophia, you're nothing without people like me running this place." Marcus immediately stepped between them, his tone like steel. "Back up, Michael." But Sophia gently touched her brother's arm, signaling restraint. She didn't need protection. Her composure was her armor. "You're wrong, Michael," she said, her voice calm but cold. "People like you built walls. I build doors." The line cut through the tension like lightning. Karen broke down completely, sobbing as she muttered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was jealous. I thought you had everything." Sophia turned toward her. "Jealousy is just pain wearing a disguise," she said softly. "But pain doesn't excuse cruelty. If you truly regret this, let your actions prove it. Change doesn't start with tears. It starts with truth." Karen nodded weakly, her face streaked with tears. "I will," she whispered. "I'll do better." As Sophia turned back toward the press, flashes from cameras illuminated her face. She didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her chin slightly and spoke directly to them. "To every person watching," she began, her voice steady and powerful. "What happened here today is not just about me. It's about every guest, every employee, and every person who's ever been judged before being seen. Discrimination hides behind professionalism every day. And today, it's done hiding. The reporters leaned closer, recording every word. This company was founded on hospitality, not hierarchy. She continued. We will not tolerate bias, prejudice, or silence. We are implementing an internal overhaul immediately. Every manager, every employee, every leader will undergo bias accountability training, effective tonight. This incident will not define us. Our response will... Applause rose slowly from the guests and a few staff members who had quietly witnessed everything. Emily Chen stood among them, her eyes wide with admiration. David Ruiz clapped once, then twice, then others joined in. The sound filled the lobby, a sound of hope cutting through the shame. As the press continued filming, Robert whispered to Sophia, "What about the police? Do you want to file charges for obstruction?" "Not yet," Sophia said calmly. "We'll handle this through internal review first, but if anyone tampered with evidence, the law will have its say." She turned back to Michael, whose defiance had begun to crumble. "You had a chance to lead with decency," she said softly. "Now you'll answer for your choices." For the first time. Michael's anger faltered. His eyes darted toward Victor, who was quietly handing his ID badge to Robert. "You betrayed me," Michael said bitterly. Victor shook his head. "No, I betrayed myself when I stayed silent." Marcus placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder, speaking low enough for only her to hear. "You sure you want to do this here? You could let legal handle it." Sophia's gaze swept across the room, the dripping chandelier light, the guests whispering, the faces that had once ignored her but now looked at her with awe. "No," she said quietly. "This isn't just business. This is culture, and culture starts with accountability." Outside. The rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered faintly through the glass. The storm had broken. Sophia exhaled slowly, then turned to Robert. "Suspend Thomas Ward and Lisa Patel pending review. They stayed silent when they should have spoken. Silence enables injustice." "Understood," Robert said. The announcement was met with another ripple of murmurs. Some faces were frightened, others relieved. Sophia stepped forward again, her presence commanding the space. "This isn't just a firing," she said. "This is a new beginning. From this moment, Grant Hospitality will stand for integrity, inclusion, and courage." The room, once filled with arrogance and cruelty, now stood quiet under the weight of those words. Michael Hayes was escorted out of the building, his once confident stride reduced to a shuffle. Karen followed, tears still streaming. Victor lingered a moment longer, looking at Sophia. "I'll make it right," he said softly. She gave a single nod. "Then start by telling the truth." And as the doors closed behind them, Sophia turned toward the gathered staff and press, her face illuminated by the fading light. "We're not just rebuilding a company," she said. "We're rebuilding trust." The next morning, the Grant Lux Hotel was unrecognizable. The same marble floors that had reflected arrogance the day before now echoed with purpose. At 9 a.m., every senior employee was summoned to the penthouse suite for an emergency company-wide meeting, the same suite where Sophia Grant had once been denied entry. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and quiet shame. Cameras from corporate communications were rolling, but this time, not for publicity, it was for record. Sophia stood at the head of the long glass conference table, wearing a crisp white suit, her posture flawless, her eyes steady. Behind her, the city skyline shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus stood nearby, arms folded, silent but watchful. The employees seated before her represented every tier of the hotel: management, reception, housekeeping, dining, security. Among them sat Emily Chen, David Ruiz, and Robert Klein, all now symbols of quiet integrity. Thomas Ward and Lisa Patel sat farther down, both suspended but invited to attend. Sophia began without pleasantries. "What happened yesterday will not be buried under excuses or paperwork," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "It was a moment that revealed who we are when no one is watching, and if that's who we've become, then we've lost sight of why Grant Hospitality exists." The room was silent. Every word seemed to weigh double its sound. "This company was built on one principle: dignity," she continued. "Not luxury, not profit, not power, dignity. Every person who walks through our doors, whether a guest or an employee, deserves to feel seen, heard, and respected. We failed that principle." She paused, letting the words land. "But we will rebuild it." Marcus stepped forward and placed a stack of folders on the table. "Inside those folders," he said, "is our reform blueprint, effective immediately. Grant Hospitality is launching the Equity First initiative." Sophia nodded. "That initiative includes 3 major actions," she explained. "First, we are implementing an AI-driven bias detection system across all employee interactions, internal and customer-facing. Every recorded call, email, and incident report will be analyzed for language patterns that indicate discrimination or bias. Second, we are opening an anonymous ethics hotline, available 24 hours a day, where employees can report misconduct without fear. Third, promotions will now include an integrity evaluation. You can't lead people if you can't see them as equals." Heads turned. A few employees whispered to one another, unsure whether to feel impressed or terrified. Sophia continued, "To lead these reforms, 2 individuals have shown the courage this company needs." She turned toward Emily. "Emily Chen, your empathy and bravery yesterday reminded us what humanity looks like. You're being promoted to Customer Experience Manager, effective immediately." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say nothing," Sophia replied softly. "Just keep being who you are." Applause broke out across the room. Even those who had been silent the day before joined in. Then Sophia looked toward David Ruiz. "And David," she said, "you stood for what was right even when threatened. That kind of courage defines leadership. You are hereby promoted to Regional Director of Security Operations." David rose slowly, stunned. "Thank you, ma'am," he said. "I won't let you down." Sophia smiled faintly. "You already haven't." As the applause settled, her expression turned serious again. "Now," she said, "for those who failed to act, Thomas, Lisa, I asked you here because this isn't about punishment. It's about growth." Thomas's eyes lowered. "I didn't speak up," he admitted quietly. "I saw it happening. But I was afraid. I've got a family, and after my past mistakes." "Addiction doesn't make you weak," Sophia interrupted gently. "Silence does. You'll be suspended without pay for 4 weeks and required to complete community service through our partnership program. After that, if you've grown, your job will still be here." Thomas nodded, eyes wet. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't waste the chance." Lisa Patel spoke next, trembling. "I stayed quiet because I was scared of losing my visa," she said. "My parents depend on me. I thought silence was safety." Sophia's tone softened. "Safety built on silence isn't real, but honesty is. You'll undergo retraining and shadow Emily for the next month. Let her remind you what compassion looks like." Lisa's relief was visible. She nodded quickly. "Thank you, Ms. Grant." Sophia took a slow breath and continued. "Let me be clear. What happened at this hotel isn't an isolated event. It's a reflection of a system that has learned to look away. That system ends today." She pressed a button on the table, and a large screen illuminated behind her with a slide titled, "The New Standard of Hospitality." The first bullet point read, "Every voice matters." The second, "Accountability over comfort." The third, "Integrity before image." "This," Sophia said, pointing to the screen, "is the foundation for every decision we make moving forward. No one is untouchable, not even me." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Marcus smiled slightly. "You heard her? Even the CEO answers to these standards." Sophia looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "If you can't align with this vision, I respect your choice to leave. But if you stay, understand that we're not just running a hotel. We're shaping an example for every corporation in this country." There was a pause. Then Victor Lang's name appeared on the next slide. The room stiffened. "Before we proceed," Sophia said, "there's something you all need to know. Mr. Lang came forward last night with evidence that helped confirm what happened. He chose truth over fear. While his actions before were wrong, his decision to make things right will not go unacknowledged." She turned to Marcus, who handed her a document. "Victor Lang is permanently dismissed from management, but he will join our new community outreach program as a speaker on ethical leadership and reform. Sometimes, repentance is more powerful than punishment." The staff nodded slowly, understanding. Sophia then looked toward Robert Klein. "Robert, your diligence saved this company from a deeper scandal. Your role as chief of security is being expanded. You'll now oversee integrity compliance across all properties." Robert gave a respectful nod. "It's an honor, ma'am." Sophia smiled faintly. "It's a responsibility." The meeting continued for over an hour, each segment more intense than the last. Yet the tension slowly gave way to hope. The employees could feel the difference, not just in policy, but in purpose. When the meeting ended, Sophia didn't dismiss them. "Instead," she said, "before you go, I want to tell you something personal." The room quieted again. "When I was a child," she began, "my father worked in a hotel much smaller than this one. He used to tell me that true hospitality wasn't about chandeliers or fine wine. It was about kindness," he said. "If you can't serve a stranger with respect, you don't belong in the business of people. Yesterday, we failed that test, but today, we begin again." She paused, her voice lowering. "This company is my life's work, but it's more than mine. It's ours. If we protect its integrity, it will outlive us all." Marcus looked at her with quiet pride. The employees rose to their feet, not because they were told to, but because something inside them shifted. The applause that followed wasn't just respect, it was belief. Sophia's reforms would go on to reshape an empire. But in that moment, standing in her once-denied suite surrounded by those willing to change, she knew the true transformation had already begun. The story of what happened at the Grand Lux Hotel spread faster than anyone imagined. Within 24 hours, the video recorded by James Lee had reached over 12 million views across every major news outlet and social platform. Talk shows, civil rights leaders, and legal experts analyzed every frame. The image of Sophia Grant standing calmly in the rain, the arrogance of Michael Hayes, the nervous silence of Karen Ellis, and the quiet defiance of the young bellhop who had captured it all. Some called it the most defining moment in modern corporate ethics. Others simply called it justice. But to Sophia, it was never about revenge or headlines. It was about restoration, of dignity, of values, and of the purpose her company was founded on. While the world debated and speculated, Sophia worked. The Equity First initiative was rolled out across all Grant hospitality branches. Mandatory ethics training sessions were held in 22 cities, and every regional manager was required to attend diversity and accountability workshops led by outside experts. Within weeks, what had begun as a scandal evolved into a movement. The company's reputation, once bruised, began to heal. Universities invited Sophia to speak about moral leadership, and Harvard Business School reached out to turn the incident into a case study titled "When Power Meets Prejudice." But the journey to justice wasn't without its consequences. Michael Hayes faced multiple lawsuits, one from Grant Hospitality, one from Sophia personally, and another from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The evidence was overwhelming. The recovered emails, the deleted footage, and the witness testimonies left no room for denial. Michael tried to settle, but Sophia refused. "You built a system on fear and arrogance," she told her lawyer, "and now that same system must hold you accountable." When the verdict arrived months later, Michael was ordered to pay damages and was permanently banned from holding any managerial position in hospitality. He lost his savings, his home, and his career. At first, he was bitter, blaming the media, the staff, and even Sophia for his downfall. But life has a way of humbling the proud. As part of his community service, he was assigned to teach job readiness classes in a prison re-entry program. He resisted at first, showing up late and lecturing without heart, but over time, he began to listen. One afternoon, a young man who had just been released from prison said to him, "You used to have power. Maybe your job now is to help others find theirs." The words pierced him in a way no courtroom ever could. Slowly, he changed. By the end of the year, Michael was volunteering full-time, no longer bitter, but wiser. A man finally learning the meaning of work with purpose. Karen Ellis's fall came more quietly, but hit deeper. After her dismissal, she entered a long custody battle for her 12-year-old daughter, Amara. The court hearings exposed the personal demons Karen had long hidden. Her estranged relationship with Amara's father, a black artist she had loved and abandoned under her family's pressure. During the final hearing, the judge looked at her and said, "Your child deserves a mother who can see beyond color." Those words stayed with her. She lost custody for 6 months and spent that time in counseling, forced to confront the prejudice she had carried and the shame she had buried. One morning, she saw Sophia on television, testifying before Congress about corporate bias and accountability. Sophia's calm, steady words, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's rebuilding what's worth saving," struck her to the core. That night, Karen wrote Sophia a letter. "You showed me what strength looks like," she wrote. "I've spent years teaching my daughter to be proud of who she is. Now, I'm learning to do the same." She didn't expect a reply. But a month later, a small envelope arrived with Sophia's handwriting. "Redemption begins when honesty meets humility. Keep going." It changed her life. Karen joined a local community program, later founding an organization called Clearview Voices, which helped parents unlearn racial bias within their own homes. In the organization's first promotional photo, Karen stood proudly beside Amara, smiling, no longer hiding who they were. Victor Lang's transformation was slower, marked by guilt and reflection. After being dismissed, he cooperated fully with investigators, handing over emails and deleted files that confirmed Michael's involvement. The evidence helped close the case, but Victor couldn't forgive himself easily. Months later, Sophia reached out personally. She offered him a second chance, not at management, but at redemption. The Grant Foundation for Ethical Leadership had just launched, and Sophia wanted him to speak about moral accountability. "You know what silence costs," she told him. "Now teach others the price of truth." At first, Victor refused, too ashamed to face anyone. But one day, he saw a clip of Sophia's congressional address. She said, "Real change begins when the guilty decide to teach, not to hide." Something inside him shifted. He accepted the offer and began speaking to business schools and corporations about integrity. I stayed silent because I was scared, he told one audience. But silence doesn't protect. It corrodes. His story moved people, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Grant Hospitality's recovery became a case study in resilience. By the end of the year, profits had stabilized, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and major networks called Sophia's reform a blueprint for corporate ethics. Her testimony before Congress became a national highlight. Standing beneath the marble dome, she declared, "We train employees to smile at guests, but not to see them. If kindness isn't embedded in policy, it's just performance." Lawmakers applauded. Her speech made headlines around the world. Meanwhile, Emily Chen and David Ruiz thrived in their new positions. Emily launched empathy training programs across the hotel chain, while David built a department that monitored ethical standards and fairness in hiring. Their work not only changed company culture, but reduced turnover by nearly 30%. James Lee, the bellhop who started it all with his courage, received a scholarship to study media and justice at Columbia University, funded personally by Sophia. "You used your voice when others stayed silent," she told him. "Never stop doing that." Through all of it, Sophia remained steady, not boastful, not proud, but deeply grounded, she often said. "This wasn't my victory. It was everyone's awakening." Late at night, when the city lights glowed across Manhattan, she would stand on her balcony and think about her father's old words. "Dignity isn't something you own. It's something you give." She finally understood what he meant. Michael found purpose in humility. Karen found healing through love. Victor found redemption through truth. And Sophia, she found peace in justice. The Grant Lux Hotel that once symbolized exclusion had become the face of transformation. Guests walked in greeted not just with smiles but with sincerity. Employees, once fearful of speaking, now had a voice. The scandal that could have destroyed an empire instead rebuilt one, stronger, wiser, and more human. And through it all, Sophia Grant became more than a CEO. She became a symbol of what leadership looks like when power chooses principle over pride. 9 months later, the rain had long passed. The Grant Lux Hotel stood brighter than ever, its name now synonymous not with scandal, but with transformation. The lobby that had once witnessed humiliation now carried the warmth of welcome. The marble floors that had echoed with arrogance now reflected the steady footsteps of purpose. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Sophia Grant stood in her father's home in Brooklyn, where family and close colleagues had gathered to celebrate Henry Grant's 72nd birthday. The old brownstone smelled of home-cooked food and nostalgia. Laughter filled the air. For the first time in months, Sophia allowed herself to breathe freely. Henry sat at the head of the table, his voice warm and proud. "My little girl," he said, looking at Sophia with misty eyes. "You turned pain into power. You made people remember what I used to tell you. That respect has nothing to do with titles. It's about how you treat others when no one's watching." Everyone applauded softly, across the room. Marcus smiled, finally seeing his sister at peace. "Dad," Sophia replied, her voice tender, "you taught me everything I needed to know. You said dignity doesn't shout, it stands. And that's what I tried to do." He chuckled. "You did more than stand. You made the world stand with you." Outside, the late afternoon light bathed the street in gold. The guests gathered in the backyard for a surprise announcement. Sophia took the microphone, her eyes glowing with calm pride. 9 months ago, something painful happened at one of our hotels, she began. But what followed wasn't a story of disgrace. It became a story of awakening. We've changed policies, restructured leadership, and most importantly, changed hearts. She paused, scanning the crowd. Among them stood faces that told stories of redemption. Karen Ellis, once broken by guilt, now stood beside her teenage daughter Amara, holding hands. Karen had written to Sophia months earlier, asking if she could meet in person. Sophia had agreed, not out of pity, but out of belief that forgiveness could do more than punishment ever could. Now, Karen stood in the very home of the woman she had once humiliated, humbled and reborn. When Sophia called her name, Karen stepped forward. The crowd grew silent. "Karen," Sophia said gently, "you chose accountability when it would have been easier to disappear. You're now working with our new initiative on inclusive parenting education. I'm proud of you." Tears filled Karen's eyes. "You didn't just forgive me," she said softly. "You gave me a reason to live better." The crowd applauded, some wiping tears. Henry nodded approvingly. "That's my girl," he whispered. "Next." Sophia turned to another familiar face. Victor Lang stepped forward, holding a small envelope. His once nervous posture was now calm. "I don't deserve this kindness," he said quietly, "but I promise to honor it." He opened the envelope and revealed a donation check to the Grant Foundation, the very organization that had given him a second chance. "Your story saved me," he told Sophia. "Now I want to help others find their way back too." The applause came again, softer this time, filled with sincerity. Sophia smiled. "Redemption," she said, "is the bridge between guilt and growth." Across the yard, Emily Chen and David Ruiz stood together, proud of what they had helped build. Emily had become the youngest senior manager in the company's history, and David's department had been recognized for setting a national standard in ethical corporate culture. Even James Lee was there, home from Columbia University for the weekend. He hugged Sophia tightly. "You changed my life," he said. She smiled. "No, James, you changed mine. You reminded me that truth can start from the smallest act of courage." As the evening sun dipped below the rooftops, Henry raised his glass for a toast. "To my daughter, Sophia Grant," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "To every man and woman who found courage because of her. Power. My friends, doesn't always wear a suit or sit behind a desk. Sometimes it's a soaked woman in the rain who refuses to be broken. That's real power." The crowd erupted in applause, some cheering, others simply nodding in quiet reverence. Sophia looked around, at her family, her reformed colleagues, her loyal staff, and felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. Later that night, as the guests left and the lights dimmed, she stood on the porch beside Marcus. "You ever think about that day?" he asked. "Every day," she admitted, "but not with anger anymore. It's strange. The worst moment of my career became the best lesson of my life." Marcus smiled. "You turned a storm into sunlight." She nodded, her gaze lifting toward the city skyline in the distance. "The storm was necessary. Without it, I wouldn't have known how strong the foundation was." The wind blew softly through the trees as she looked up at the stars, her father's laughter echoing faintly from inside. "You know, Marcus," she said, "maybe this is what leadership really means. Not building empires, but rebuilding people." He put a hand on her shoulder. "And you did that." As the night settled and the last light from the kitchen faded, Sophia whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. For justice, for mercy, for grace. The Grant name, once tested by scandal, now stood for something greater than wealth or prestige. It stood for integrity. And in that peaceful moment, Sophia understood that her legacy wasn't the hotel she built or the empire she expanded. It was the culture she restored, one rooted in empathy, equality, and courage. In the distance, the lights of Manhattan shimmered like silent witnesses to her journey. Sophia smiled faintly, closed her eyes, and said the words that had carried her through every storm. Power with purpose changes the world. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes in justice, dignity, and change. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life.